Hello, vinyl people. Hey, I thought I'd pop up here into the Hot Vinyl Attic to do a little deep dive into the vinyl collection. One of the most popular videos that we've had on this channel has been my sharing of my extensive Beatle collection on vinyl. And that I'll link it in the description, but that was really fun to share some weird ones with you as well as the popular ones that everyone should have. I recorded it shortly after I had to sell my Beatle Butcher cover, so it was bittersweet. So what I thought I'd do, since people seem to really like that one, is go through each of the four Fabs, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, and share the vinyl I have with them, and then tell a little story about each of the four, my personal connections. Okay, so here we go. We are going to go, I don't know if this is chronological or what. I just grabbed the John Lennon section of the vinyl. And of course you have to start with Two Virgins. There it is. Bleep it out, censors. I had to learn that John Lennon was uncircumcised by getting my hands on this very strange album from 1968. Makes me wonder, are the rest of the Beatles uncircumcised? Paul? But I got this at Beatlefest 78. You listen to it once, and it's just kind of an interesting thing. That is followed up by Unfinished Music number 2, Life with the Lions, which is a little bit more interesting, of John and Yoko's experimental, very, very not pop music records. This is a Japanese import, obviously. And then number 3, before we get to anything real, is the Wedding album from 69. This is, again, a Japanese import that I got at Turtles Records. And came with a souvenir, fake piece of cake, and all kinds of little fun things on the inside. I'm glad I still have this. Very hard to find on vinyl. Then we start getting to music with John's 1969 live piece in Toronto concert with Eric Clapton on guitar and Alan White and Yoko screaming her lungs out. But you do get Beatle John, still officially in the Beatles, although he quit the Beatles on the flight home officially, doing Your Blues from the White Album, which is a pretty great moment. And side 2 is all Yoko doing her magic. Then we started getting into John's sort of proper solo career. So 1970, Plastic Ono Band. Also, there's a Yoko version of this. Maybe I'll do Yoko's vinyl at some point. Also called Yoko Ono Plastic Ono Band, in which the reverse Mother, lots of screams from Arthur Janeff's Scream Therapy, very hard to listen to for a lot of Beatle fans because it was so stripped down and honest. Phil Spector producing it. Then, of course, Beatle John returns with the Imagine album, 1971. George Harrison on guitar. Again, Phil Spector adding his stuff. Klaus Voormann. What a beautiful record this is. This is just what the world needed. And we're still singing Imagine. Imagine there's no religion. Imagine there's no countries. Imagine. If you're going to have a John Lennon album on vinyl, this is the one to have. Then we get to 1972's Life with sometime in New York City. Once he moves to New York City, some cool records on this album, or some cool songs like the New York City song and Luckily Irish. And Yoko also has some kind of cool songs. World Water is really good. Them doing Attica State. I mean, it was basically like a snapshot, like the way we think of hip-hop now. I mean, Chuck D once called hip-hop the CNN for black people. This was like CNN for radicals in 1972. The single Woman is the End of the World, we're kind of rethinking differently now. John was trying to make a feminist statement. Didn't sound too good on the radio. But there's also a second disc on here, which is a live jams that include him playing with Frank Zappa. 1973, the return of Beatle John. This is the beginning of his Lost Weekend period where he is kind of on the outs with Yoko. I think this record is underrated. I think it's just the production on it sucks, but the songs on it, out of the blue, one of the best love songs ever written. I wish this record had really, really been dealt with by a George Martin, and I think it would have been seen as much more classic. This is another version. One of the things that was happening in the 1970s was the oil crisis. It was getting harder and harder to get vinyl. So there was a lot of cheap knockoff versions. This is a knockoff of mine. Mind Games. Here we go. John's last real record of the 70s, Walls and Bridges. Wow, what a great record. Steel and Glass, so much of this was about his life without Yoko and his business dealings with the X-Fabs. But Elton John on here, Whatever Gets You Through the Night, is a rave up. Oh, great. And this is the original, the flaps open up. Great record to have. And of course, these great pictures of John. 74 John. The rock and roll music album that comes out in 75 is kind of a contractual obligation, basically because he ripped off Chuck Berry in Come Together on Abbey Road. And they had been working on this album with Phil Spector over a couple of years, and then he just sort of pieces it all together. But this is a great picture of John in Hamburg in 61, and that's Paul and George and Pete Best walking by. So Pete Best finally makes it to the cover of a Beatles album. Good old Pete Best. And then in 76, to finish out his contract to EMI Apple, his greatest hits album, Shaved Fish, which has a kind of a cool version of Give Peace a Chance that fades into Cold Turkey. And this is how I first heard Give Peace a Chance and Cold Turkey, was on this great compilation. All right, then we start getting into some weird stuff. This is Elton John and John Lennon on stage. The deal was Elton made a deal with John. He said, "I'll sing on whatever gets you through the night. But if it goes to number one, you got to appear on stage with me." And John's like, "I haven't had a single number one as a solo Beatle. It's never going to happen. Whatever gets you through the night goes to number one." John joins Elton on stage for 3 songs at Madison Square Garden, including "I Saw Her Standing There," and he is reunited with Yoko. Bootleg, Working Class Hero. I got this one at Beatlefest 78, double one. Has some cool outtakes, but has also the Elton John stuff. But it has a thing on here that supposedly is John Lennon and Jimi Hendrix doing Day Tripper, which is totally... Sorry, John Lennon and Jimi Hendrix never jammed. So... But it's funny the stuff that shows up on bootlegs. All right, then we get to 1980. Boom. This is the record. When the single came out, we were all waiting for a new... It'd been 5 years. We were all waiting for a new John Lennon record. I remember being in the car and hearing Starting Over and thinking, this is what we waited for? This is like an Elvis imitation. I wasn't that crazy about it, but I bought it. But, of course I had to buy it. I mean, I bought it, and then, of course... shortly after John was killed, and I even wrote the date on the price tag here. Is a day I still can't really talk very much about. We have some other things. The John Lennon collection, one of the best ofs that came out after his death with a great Annie Leibovitz photo. I think we might be getting a little out of whack here in the order. A super disc of Double Fantasy. This was before we had CDs, so we had high fidelity discs. What else is in here? I haven't really been through this in a while. I guess we should do this one next, of course, is Milk and Honey, meant to be the sequel to Double Fantasy, which Yoko and Jack Douglas sort of put together to make it sound like a bookend, although the John songs are certainly not completed. The Yoko songs sound amazing on here. It's like she really comes off sounding great, but it was just really hard to have this record come out in 84 after John had died. Borrowed Time, great little picture of Sean there, 12-inch single. And then we finally get a live album sometime in New York City from the 1972 benefit concert for retarded children that was organized by none other than Geraldo Rivera, produced by Phil Spector, and sounds really Spector-y. This is another one that could be redone. It would sound better. Men Love Avenue. I love this one. This one came out in the later 80s, and some of the songs from the rock and roll session and some of the songs from the Walls and Bridges session, but including a song called Here We Go Again, which John had written for Edgar Winter, I think. It's an amazing song, and this is a cool little collection. Then there was this tribute to Yoko Ono that John is on. Great version of Elvis Costello doing Walking on Thin Ice, but John basically, they took the Yoko Ono's off the song Every Man Has a Woman Who Loves Him, and left John's on there, so sort of turning it into a John Lennon song. So it's sort of an extra bonus John Lennon song. The Imagine movie that came out in the late 80s, this is the soundtrack, and it was our first time that we sort of officially heard Real Love, which would, in 94, be given to the remaining Beatles and become a big, huge Beatle hit in 95. And then the rest of these are, we've got this one, Heart Play, which is a interview with John and Yoko shortly before his death. It's always, I mean, John was always so full of wisdom. Every interview record that he's on, I would just study and listen. And the rest of them are the Lost Lennon Tapes. You know, a bunch of John's music and demos disappeared from the Dakota, and it turned out some of it was connected to Fred Seaman, who was their assistant. Some of it had been in the vaults. And in the days before the internet and streaming, these Lost Lennon Tape records started showing up, and they were a treasure trove of all kinds of early versions of Beatles songs, including the Escher tapes, John, workshopping songs that would end up being his final recordings, Double Fantasy and Milk and Honey. And so they all had these great covers. Here's one. I don't have all of them. I have a handful of them. I used to get them at Fantasyland Records in Atlanta on Peach Street. Look at this one. John from How I Won the War. Give a piece of chance, y'all. This is another one from that film. Peppery John. Sergeant Pepper John. And another Sergeant Gripweed. Right? A lot of these use, I guess, How I Won the War pictures. There they are. Yoko, still with us. She's really gained stature over the years, hasn't she? So those are my John Lennon vinyl. Here's a quick story. Speaking of Yoko, every time I go to New York, I go to the Dakota. I always want to pay tribute to where John and Yoko lived. I've been there many times, and I went on December 8th, the year 2000. The story was a friend of mine in high school and I, in the summer of 1980, had a plan that when we graduated from high school in 1981, we were going to go to New York City and meet John Lennon, because apparently he's just walking around Central Park. So we had this big plan to meet John Lennon, and of course we couldn't do that because he was murdered on December 8th. So December 8th, 2000, on the 20th anniversary, I needed to be there. I flew from Portland, and I wanted to be among the number of people meeting at Strawberry Fields. There's always some John Lennon fans, but it was packed with thousands of people, freezing New York City December day, and people singing John solo songs and Beatles songs, and Yoko put a candle in the window up on the Dakota on the corner in their apartment, so she was with us. But that's not the story. The story is everybody was singing, and I remember they were singing I Am the Walrus, and somebody passed a joint around. I don't smoke pot. I don't, there are other things. I'm more of a whiskey guy, but it was for John Lennon, and, Dylan gave Lennon pot, and Lennon gave it to the, So for John Lennon, I'm going to take a drag. What's the big deal? So I take a hit off this joint, pass it up around, tap on the shoulder, turn around, it's New York PD Blue. Cop says, come with me. And I don't really know about pot smoking very well, so I held my breath because I didn't want to blow the smoke in his face. So I'm holding my breath, walking out with him, and my friend is like, oh no, what's happening? And of course, I didn't realize the more you hold it in your lungs, the stoneder you get. So he, took me outside the crowd and said, I saw what you did there. It's against the law. There's no tolerance in New York. This is when Giuliani, by the way, is the mayor, and they're just locking up everybody for a joint. And I finally had to let my breath out, so I just said, it was for John Lennon, go googa joop. And this pot smoke comes out right into the cop's face. He's not happy. I'm thinking in my mind that, for John Lennon's death day, Mayor Giuliani is going to suspend all the drug laws in the city. And then I start getting paranoid. Like, I'm going to get locked up in Rikers. This is it. And so I start what I call my white privilege dance. I'm a college professor. I'm from Oregon. This isn't really a crime in Oregon. It's just a fine. I'm a criminologist. I work with cops. Some of my best friends are cops. I'm like doing this dance while I'm still a little bit baked. And the cop finally says, all right, I'll let you go. But I'm gonna exit you from the park. You're not allowed to be back in Central Park. Get out of here. I'm giving you a break, but you are not allowed to trespass in the park. And I'm like, thank you, officer, thank you. Then I'm walking away, and I'm like, hold on a second. I came 3,000 miles to be here, to be with all these Beatle fans, to celebrate. What am I doing? So, in my altered consciousness, I went around the corner, bought a hat, bought a dark wool hat, pulled it down, thinking the cop would never recognize me, and walked right back into the crowd. And my friend was like, what happened? I said, it's all right. I talked my way out of it. Everything is good. And she's like, you're so lucky. And I'm like, I know. I thought I was going to Rikers. She said, no, you're so lucky. She said, look. And I looked around and I saw that the cop had another guy who just happened to be African American in handcuffs up against the car. Some kid, just like me, smoked the same joint. I talked my way out of it. That kid was going to Rikers. So that was a good lesson in the racial profiling of Mayor Giuliani's New York City. So I was lucky, but, in my place, some kid now has a criminal record. But I tell that story to my students, but I also tell it because it's about how John Lennon brought us together and is an energy to fight against those injustices. And I hope that guy got out. I would love to run into him someday, 20-something years later. Be like, what was that like? All right, that's my little John Lennon story, and my vinyl will be back soon with Paul, and the Paul vinyl, which obviously is much bigger. He's been around. He can't stop putting out music. We're gonna get back to our 100 albums list shortly. Okay, back to a regularly scheduled broadcast. All these records matter. John still matters with us, to us, for us, with us. I'm not stoned. You matter. Let's talk about it. We all shine on. Peace, John. We love you.